Hello, this is Allison Hunt, and I'm going to read you an interview that they had with Hermine Decker, the founder of Slocum House Theater. She also went to school in Pullman, Washington at WSU, and she ran the drama department at Clark College for many years until she retired. The thing about Slocum House, I'm slowly finding more things online that I didn't know existed, which is really cool. I knew Hermine personally, but I don't really know her family. So I'm just going to kind of read you some things that I found online to give you some more backstory about who she was and what she did. So this is an interview. This is January 14th, 1994. This is from WSU Vancouver Library. So I'd like to share it with you so we can learn a little bit more about her. Jean Norwood is at the home of Hermine Decker. Hermine is going to talk to us about her long career in Clark County and Clark College, her involvement with the Slocum House, her interest in photography, her interest in history, as well as her other interests. She's going to tell us something about the many honors and awards that she has been given, and she will tell us a little bit more about her plans for the future. Shall we start with where you were born? I was born in Pullman, Washington. I was the last one in my family. My sister, Winona, was an accident. Then they didn't want to raise a child alone. There was 9 years between Winona and my brother, who was still the last one actually, and then we were a new family. The older ones had sort of taken over for my mother, who wasn't very well. It was Rena, the oldest one, who sort of took over me. At the time, Gail was sick. She had a bad heart. The doctor that they had really killed her. He had her playing basketball, and I don't know what all, exercising all the time, and she finally died. I was just a baby. Gail was the very popular one in the town. She was a lovely girl and said I was going to be her baby, but of course she didn't. Anyway, she was my father's favorite. Father wouldn't pay much attention to the new baby until she said something to him. After Gail died, I was only a few months old. When she died, my mother wouldn't eat. Her hair turned white. It was white. My father's hair was white. It started getting that way when he was 18. Then he went the other way with me. He spoiled me. He gave me practically everything I wanted, but he would never give me money. My oldest sister and he really made me do things instead of handing it out over like the rest of the family. The oldest and youngest got the least money from my father. I'm glad. He was very religious, but very kind to everybody. He was mayor, for instance, for 12 years in Pullman, but he wouldn't file. He decided he didn't want to be that way. So he didn't file until the very last minute, and nobody else would file. That's how he got to be mayor for so long. Of course, he had a lot of enemies. His big thing was photography. He liked taking pictures. When I was a kid, I did plays in the backyard. I had a camera. I don't know who gave it to me. I have lots of pictures that were taken during my childhood. We traveled quite a bit. My mother used to always take me along, and I used to always take a camera. In college, I had my camera stolen. For a while, I didn't have one. I was teaching when I got my second good camera, and that was they don't make those anymore. They don't make them anymore. Then when the camera was stolen while I was teaching, I was taking both color and black and white, and I always had to borrow. So that's how I happened to get a Hasselblad that had a removable back. That was a great thing. I wouldn't let anyone touch it except my grandson. He is apparently interested in it. He can even fix it without seeing the inside. He's talking now about taking my darkroom, but I don't do black and white. I didn't want anyone in the house down there, Slocum House, to have these. They have stolen things, and besides, I didn't want them there, apparently the museum. The pictures there were very mixed up, and people had been stealing them, and they'd tear them up and take chunks of what they wanted. There was a restaurateur who had a lot of old pictures on the wall. Some he got from the museum, and some were given to him. Somebody came and broke the window and took some jewelry and stole his pictures. I helped him with them, and I got interested and I worked down at the museum making files for the pictures. David Freese set me up with a heavy table and file cabinets. I came to work every Tuesday, but when the new person came, Mary Klein came, I came down and they were all mixed up and some were stolen. So I took mine home and some that had been given to me. I'll give them to you folks. I've got a lot of pictures of plays, and he doesn't need to worry about them. She means Gus Norwood. Then I went to Europe. I took a lot of pictures. I still had my other camera when I was there, so I didn't have any black and whites. They're all colored slides. I don't print color. What should I do with those slides of Europe? Well, I'd keep them. They're bigger, you see. Most people won't print them. Some people won't print them now. You have to have a standard size. I think that's crazy. You take the same picture with the Hasselblad and with other camera, and even though you think it's a good camera, you can see the difference. Let's go back to the Duffys. You were telling us something before we started that sounded so interesting. Well, he loved Scots and Scotch jokes. My sister did a little traveling, and they were married in Scotland. I have the crest. When I was in Edinburgh, I went to a shop and asked if the Duffys had a crest. He said, certainly. The Duffys were lowland Scots, descending from the conquering Normans and Saxons, not the original Scots. My father was a mathematical genius. He bought an adding machine for his business and never used it because it was too slow. Neither my mother or father had much education. We don't think my mother even went to high school. The reason my father came to Pullman when he came to this country was that his brother taught there. Both families lived in the area and had frequent get-togethers. I was the youngest of the whole bunch. I was spoiled. My cousin came over when I was 18 and lived with my Uncle Will. They were very close. The reason my parents moved to Pullman was that they wanted their children to have a college education, and they didn't think they could afford to send them away, so they moved to a college town. Smart. It's really smart. They came to Idaho first. They were from Iowa, my parents were. They came to Troy, Idaho, because my uncle had a mill there. My father worked for him when he first came out. Then they moved to Pullman because there was a college there. There wasn't at all at Troy at the time. She never went to college. 1 year is all. She never forgave her. There was no talk about high school things because my mother wasn't interested, so I went to college. She was really I think I got my drama from her because my father was always willing. He would always see everything, but he was just doing it because I was in it. I didn't major in drama because I think it must have been my father. But do you know that when I graduated from college, of the country said I wasn't good enough to be in college? He didn't think I should go to college, so I majored in high school to be in business because I figured if I couldn't be anything else, I could go to that. So I took all the business courses. Some of this interview, she kind of gets sidetracked and it gets a little confusing sometimes, but I'm just going to read it as it is, okay? Pullman College was good then. The head of the drama department was very good about making people prepare themselves for different jobs, you know. That was the real thing. I worked for the countryman for the business part of it, you see. I said it was a good thing that I had a good memory because in writing and talking dictation, I'd remember what he said and no one else could read my stuff. We were required to take a foreign language. I took Spanish and liked it. The funny thing of it is that when I went to Europe after I was out of college and teaching and all, I could understand a lot of Italian. I loved the Italian people, but now I can't understand. But I used to understand a lot. I could then. You majored in a business in your college career? No, I did a lot of drama. Our drama teacher, Daggy, was the kind of person that thought you should know everything about it. And he made us build. We had a room that was empty. He decided that he would make it into a theater. When I went out of college, I didn't get a job right away. It was during the Depression, you know. I wouldn't follow any rules. I made my own rules. And that's why I still think that my way of teaching at Clark is the best way of teaching drama. I wouldn't let anyone that didn't enroll in the class. I gave 2 plays a quarter and everyone had to be in one play and they had to be on production staff of one play. If they decided they wanted to act in both plays, they had to still do the production part. That, I think, is important. They had to learn, and I didn't hardly do any lectures at all. I had a textbook and made them read it and examine them on it. I rehearsed every day from 3:30, which was the time class was supposed to start, probably until 5:30. The people at Clark thought that I was working too hard, and they hired this other character, and he didn't know beans. The students would come back and say, "Mrs. Decker, he's not doing those right." And then he got mad at me because I was critical, you see. I remember one play we did. I had a big cast and I had to use all of the women in the school. But in the second act, I can't remember the name of the play, I couldn't get my characters on the stage. He had made the set so little. He said, "Well, you're going to have to change your action." I said, "I will now. You'll have to change the set." So I just got my students to fix the set. Some of them liked that better than the acting, you see, but they all had to act and play different parts. I was sort of a psychiatrist, if they needed. In the theater, you have a lot of homosexuals. If I thought they needed, there was one boy whose mother and father were both homosexuals when they had this family. He had a tendency too. He said, "I don't know which way I'm going to go." Then we had another one who was a real good actor, and he said he would never. They talked to me about being homosexuals. "That was one fellow that you liked pretty well," he said. "I haven't decided which way I'm going to go, but I don't think I'll ever get married." He did, and he disappeared. The last time I sent him a Christmas card, he said, "I think you know more about him than I do." But I didn't. I didn't know what happened to him. The point you were going to make was about how you help them by giving them masculine parts. Yes, I'd give them masculine parts and make them work on their voices. A lot of people didn't know that they were homosexuals. I asked him one time, "Why is it that the girls like homosexuals so well?" He said, "Because they feel safe, you see." He said, "That's why some of the women live with them. They feel safe." That's interesting. I think it's a good point, if people would only do that. How large was Clark College when you first came here? Was this your first job? My first job like that was out of Syracuse University in New York. I had already signed for Pullman. Everybody thought I should take this Syracuse job. It was a good job. It was good for me. I was teaching speech. I had a regular. I liked him. I just threw it away recently, the way he had us teach. It was good. When I came back to Clark, what I did, I decided I wanted to come out west again. The fellow that was head of the drama department was good too. He was a lot like me. He put on some of my plays. He had read them, you see. They were real good. That's when I became friends with Fred Kasser McCanna. I had done that as a student, summer drama, and they wanted me to come out in summer drama things. I have pictures of that. That's where I met Tom. He was going to summer school, and I directed those one-act plays for the summer for kids that were around the parks. By Tom, is that your husband? You were directing one-act plays in the summer at Pullman, and that's how you met him? Yes. And he was in one of the plays, and that's how you met him? Yes, and I don't remember whether let's see, I have the dates somewhere, and they used some of my plays too. I was writing a lot then. I didn't teach at Clark until I was married. Because you were a baby in this woman, you didn't teach at Clark until after the divorce? No, that's right, but I was connected with it, you see, and in the summer I did it. That's right. He had me come back the first summer I was at Syracuse. In those days, people didn't work because they were married. Is that right? Well, they were beginning to, but you see, that was during the Depression, and the men were working in the shipyards and things like that. Of course, having lived all my life in Pullman, I knew people, and my father knew so many people. And Rena, my oldest sister, worked in the library in Pullman too, after she was married. She didn't get married until she worked in Denver, and I don't know what all. She came back to Pullman after she got married. She was home for the summer. I remember my mother came out, and she said, "I think we've got a romance." This fellow that had known her in college came down to see her. I can still see him. my mother came in and she said, "I think we've got a romance." And that's what happened. Tell us about your romance. My romance was Edward R. Murrow, and I were in many classes together. Our interests were the same, and he was in drama. Drama people tend to become close lifetime friends. We were in plays together. We were in a play that was very popular. The final act was used a lot, and our teacher decided to do that. They did something which I don't believe in. They had double casts. I don't believe in that at all because they always criticize. You know, one person likes one, but they didn't have enough plays for the people that were in drama, so they had double casting. I think that leads to too much criticism. They had these different ways of doing the part, and somebody didn't like that one or the other. I like to have people know exactly what they want to make of the character. If you have a comparison, it's not good. Both of them might be good, but where there's too much competition, I don't like that at all. I'd rather do more plays. That's why I did 2 plays a quarter. They told me that they wanted me to have this helper. I thought he was the world's greatest actor. He did everything he could to make me unhappy, so I retired 2 years early. I don't know who was doing that to your teacher. It's an awful thing for a teacher to do. The old guard didn't have the support of the new administration. I remember at the time there was a fairly terrible new administration that came in. Yes, and he was supporting me, and I remember every time I would tell him how Raleigh was using me. I was head of the department, and he got so that he wouldn't come to any of the department meetings or anything. It wasn't that I didn't like teaching, because I did. I did like teaching other things. I took the Model UN and everything. I had that for several years. I was teaching speech, you see, too. This fellow would not come to class and not tell me. I had to have somebody running the class. He said to me, "Oh, my students do better if I'm not there." Some of them told me that that was true. What was the play that you and Edward R. Murrow were in? I can't tell you. I don't know what it was all about. Was it a famous play? It was then. It wouldn't be famous now. They wouldn't like it. It wasn't a comedy. It was about real good friends with the French and Edward R. Murrow as a German. I've got it. I have copies of it. Maybe we'll find it when we go through those plays we were going to. Anyway, we were in a lot of classes. Our teacher made me take all of our speech classes too, when we were in school. I forgot what I was going to say. I'm getting tired of this. We found a whole lot of plays in the attic. I don't want to get rid of these. After we were married, we lived in Bellingham, and we were really poor. We were newlyweds, and my husband wasn't the kind to want to do different things. So I got a job I went to a little theater. Then I got a job in Bellingham. I was paid too, but I had to do it all. I had to write everything, and I had to go down to the store and get the material for the next day, you know. Everybody, the clerks and everybody, began laughing. So I said, "What was it?" They had given me lots of material, and I had advertised the carrots were field carrots. And I came, and they were laughing at me. People were calling up and asking for this brand of carrot seed. And of course it wasn't the right one. They thought that was funny. They said they found out how many people were listening to the program. Later on, when my husband began working for the radio, he was a real good announcer but he was a lousy writer. They assigned him to do a program, and I had been writing stuff for him anyway. They did it, and when it was over, I said, "Well, it turned out to be a good program." I did the research and everything. I'm going to fix that. Bury the roots deep now. It's just exactly like it's happening now. About the poor and trying so that they can go out in the fields and work, you see. Anyway, they said that this was political. They signed the things on for the workers out in the field, see? And he couldn't write that kind of stuff. So I researched it and wrote it. And I said, "Well, that was a good program, wasn't it?" He looked at me and said, "Yes, it was, Hermine. You did a good job on that." He said, "We knew you just..." It wasn't very nice of them to do that. They should have given the job to me. They had assigned it to me. And they did after that. I remember one time I wrote the hello scripts. I wrote about animals, you see. This was a program for small children. Yes, I wrote it in 5-minute intervals for the grades 1, 2, and 3. Coin did it. This is what they had for their own little... I ran for the station. I did the programs for the station. But this one was full of... The fellow did the talk, and I had to write in 5 minutes for grade 1, 2, and 3. Coin did, and it was when they had their own. They found out. They couldn't continue it past one thing because they found out the teachers were using it. The 5-minute story, and the kids would listen to that, and then they'd turn it off. I knew that the lecture was bad because it was too heavy for them, but I had... Some of the little animal stories were real cute. I would find something very characteristic. For instance, that the deer lost their antlers every year, supposedly because he was... I can't remember. I haven't read it in so long. But anyway, I finally got that and used it. Just like we had a little book. We'd redo that. Yes, we were going to do the little pig story over again. She used the pictures about pigs for that play. You know, about pigs. They don't have enough nipples. They just reject one baby. So this person went for training on chinchillas. Here was this pig who was being mothered by a collie. Of course, he'd been up with those all the time. He would scratch the screen door to get in, and he wagged his tail instead of doing like pigs do, which is kind of strange. He just loved this collie dog. He'd sleep with her. He did all things that dogs would do. Because we had a good time there, I wrote this little story. Another dog tells him that he isn't a dog, and that the mothering dog isn't his mother. So he feels like he's lost, you see, because he's been adopted by a dog. The mother tells him why she had to give him up. Then he goes back and he's perfectly happy. He finds his mother dog and goes back to sleeping with her. He goes back to his adopted mother. It's a good story. It might be a good story for adopted children. They liked it, didn't they? They wrote me how much they liked this little story up there. That was a time when they were trying to keep from having children adopted, you see. There were some bad things about that some people were selling their children and people were against adoption. I only sent it out once. Sometimes you had to send it out 2 or 3 times. Nowadays you got to send them out. Like I've got this thing for the People's Liberation Council. A lot of people say you have to send it out 594 times before they accept it. He had given me only 1 short year, I think. I don't know how many times it was used. I don't have any record of it. Do you want to go back to your pictures, the ones that you copied? Yes, all right. Let's start with the pictures and go from then to when you first came to Clark College and how it was changed. Then a little about your involvement with Slocum House, and then your interest in history, which I think sort of colors a lot of the things you've done. That would be my father's influence, and my sister. She wrote a family history. Let's start with the pictures you copied. That was at the club that I joined. I was the curator at Grant House. We had to do everything. I like that attitude of having to look up and find out how to do this and do that. That's what bothers me most. I think about the amateur people that were acting. They don't want to look up anything. They just want to do their own thing the way they did. The person who was in charge at Slocum House when I was sick could only talk about money. Henry Wineski, Henry Winetski, didn't want to look up anything. I kept saying to him, if you insist on putting on modern plays, you're going to lose the house. I finally got a hold of Ted Brown. That's what happened at Grant House. So then I went to work with Mary Carson, and she was so good. She knows everything. I think that they killed her, too. I got the Slocum House through being connected because I was at a board meeting. Eva Burgett was at this board meeting, and she said, I feel sorry for the museum because they don't have a good caretaker, and he's trying so hard. Bob Hidden. I didn't know him at all then. She said, he's been trying to save one of the last ones left of the urban renewal houses. He said it's terrible that they're tearing out all those historic homes. They are well built and they're really good. He's trying to save this last one. He and the city and the architect are trying to save this house, and if they can find someone who's willing to take over and restore it and keep it going, they'll let him move it over to Esther Short Park. We had people who didn't want us to move it over there, so they thought it should be saved, but it was not being used at all, and it was always full of dirt. It was just really open space. Dr. Padel and I had been talking about it, and I had been back east in summer school getting my master's degree. I did a lot of that thing. Dr. Geiser had advised me. He said, now you have your master's degree, don't forget that you should take things that will make you a better teacher rather than get a doctor's degree. So he said, do that in the summer. I took his advice, and that's why almost every summer I went someplace to take a course. I took a course in playwriting at the University of California. I went a lot of places. Of course, I was corresponding all those years with Edward R. Murrow. He advised that too. He was kind of unhappy about the way the radio thing was using him, you know. He was like me. He liked to do things rather than read the script. He was such a good interviewer because he never talked about himself. He always talked about the person he was interviewing. That isn't right. That's why he was such a good one. I wish some of these people, when they had interviewed people, would get information from them. That's why Ed made so many friends in Europe, because he was always outside of the not making himself. See, too many people want, when they're interviewing or when they're acting, they want people to notice them. That isn't what they should do. They should be talking about the lead person and stuff. Some of the people are pretty good on that, but most of them, they want themselves praised. So Edward R. Murrow was your mentor for a long time then. Yes, I had a lot of letters from him, but he told me to burn them, so I did. That's too bad. Yes, I think I have got a couple of them that don't indicate that it's me. That he always used false names. I knew him pretty well, too, you know, being in acting. I think there's more about me in this last autobiography. There's more of me in the back. Do you think that's the best one that's written? Yes, the others I didn't agree with. He had his faults. He asked me why I didn't marry him. I said because I didn't think he would make a good husband. I still think he wouldn't have. We probably wouldn't have been friends. The woman who married him, she left him once, according to his last biography. This fellow called me. He didn't know anything. He called me from New York one day. It was on Fat Sunday. We talked for an hour, or an hour and a half long distance. He was a good biographer, I guess. I didn't find anything in, except some of those I think Ed told him weren't true. People said I should have kept the letters, but I don't think he would have wanted. Probably wouldn't have written you if he thought you were keeping the letters. That's right. Tell the story again about what he said about that luncheon. Yes, I got off subject. Dr. Cannell and I had been talking together. I had gone to summer school in Minneapolis. I had taken a ship and made it into a little one with a play. A lot of them were that way in 1933. I went to see this play that is really I tried to get them to. In fact, I was the same kind of person. I said, I don't know, I think I had just better go, because I want to see how they do it. It's a play that's so sad where the woman dies. It's just terribly sad. These students that are going to college wouldn't like it. Somebody told me it was a wonderful show. So I went, and at the end, I was all crying and teary. I remember something about that. This was a ship, kind of like a steamship or a riverboat. You came home and said, beware of that which you prayed for. You then began to dream about doing something like that on the Columbia River. I wish that I would have something like that someday. You make a prayer, just a little prayer. You have to, about things like that, because then here came your ship. What I did, I said, Seroptimist? What I said to the Seroptimist, is it big enough for a theater? She said yes. And she said she'd been turned down by the people who didn't want to restore it. You go call Bob Hidden right now. So I did. I didn't know him. I didn't know its ability to hook people. He took me down, and you should have seen it. It was in an awful state. I went down, and I was hooked. All of the misery. I've got some pictures. You'll have them down here. You'll have them down there, the museum, too, of how it looked. Wow. I can't wait to see. They had done something to that house. In fact, several people had worked on it. A woman came in and said to me, I should tell you what she said. She came to the back door. I was the only one in the house. She said, I want to see the house. Auntie Slocum, Everyone in town called her Auntie Slocum. She would love what you're doing to her house. By the way, several people had said that she had been there. A ghost? A ghost. They always say, I like what you're doing. But in this new bunch that's there now, nobody has seen her at all. They were not doing it right. Anyway, the reaction I had was that it has got to be a theater. They said that Annie Slocum loved that. She didn't have any children. She did raise a niece, but she always had people in her house. She always was having crowds. I was so scared at my enthusiasm for it that I called up every theater person in town. And the man that was at the head of, he was really anxious to get it into a theater too. It had a hall down the middle. It was just a mess. A hall down the middle of Slocum House? Yes, where you have your aisle now. It had a hall, and where the stage is, it had been turned into, they had built a bathroom in where the women's restroom is now. Anyway, so I called up all the theater people. We had a meeting, and the same thing happened to them. They got hooked, and a lot of them, that yellow book that we have, that you'll have down there eventually if you don't have it now, we have an early history. It's interesting because the woman printed a lot more than we ordered, but she made us take them. We've been giving people and selling down there too. It's out of date now. It's good for that early time. I'll see that you get one because I think I've given all mine away to people that's come to see the house. It tells the history of, but it isn't very good. There's some mistakes in it and all, but that doesn't hurt. Anyway, we got started on Bob Hidden. Oh, he has been so wonderful. That's why for me now to do anything, because he took care of the business side of it, but also he had one carpenter. We had a terrible time sometimes sometimes the animals had ruined the porch. The porch was done the old way. We couldn't find anyone who would do it. We finally did find somebody that would do it. This fellow wants to do it even if it's done wrong. He never did it wrong, see? I watched this thing on Channel 10 about this old house. I learned a lot of things that I would never have. A carpenter. Who was that person? Do you remember? That carpenter? Oh yes, they voted to name the addition after him. They hadn't done it. It's Cy Sherman. He's still alive, but he is not well and he can't come over anymore. He did some of the complicated steps. Somebody wanted to do My Three Angels again, but we couldn't do it without Cy because he has to be strong enough for 3 men to go down out of the ceiling. He was a big contractor in Portland. He's the one that tells us someday the hospital over on Hillside in Portland, someday it's on a fault and someday the whole thing is going to go down on the town. And they told him time and time again, this is the Veterans Administration Hospital on the hill. Yes, and the contractors and said it shouldn't have been built over here. They had a place over here, and it should have been over here. Was Cy on the board? No, he didn't want to be on the board. He wanted to do. Is this Alan Sherman's father? No. I know you had a lot of support in the beginning. A lot of people were dedicated to the vision of not only restoring the house with 19th decor, things like that, but also doing carefully the 19th century plays. Yes, we had a lot of. The house was moved by Gilmore Steel, and they had to change their method of moving things because it wasn't going to work. They moved it a foot a day. They extended and then we didn't have the proper support of the paper either. They didn't have anything about the house. They had moved. It was on the front page of the Columbian, the old lady moves today. Do you mean the Columbian or the Oregonian? The Oregonian. The Columbia ignored you? Yes, eventually they did. They've established a drama award in my name where every year they give the award. Oh, yes. Check 1, check 2. Here we go again. If I were a successful writer, why can't I do it in a different life? I can, but I couldn't have done it here. There are too many distractions. Yes, that's right. And I think it's good for me to have to tear out myself too. Your voice sounds so much stronger in you. That's it. And if I get to talking to Art, he talks to other people in the cast, and there's only 2 or 3 of them. I'm defending my books. I could never replace any of them if they got lost. I bought all over the country. I go to secondhand stores every time I went down to the old. I was a friend of Bauer down in Ashland. They went to him and said that they wanted to do other plays. He said they were tired of doing Chess Fair. He said, get some new directors. But after he died, they changed that. They won't want this because I got a hold of Ted Brown and Bob Hidden Jr., and neither one of them want it changed. So, as Ted Brown says, and I don't like a lot of things that Ted Brown does, but I think he's right on this, and this is the way that I feel. You're throwing away the whole thing. It's the only theater outside of. I wouldn't let them put townspeople on it or anything. So people that had always wanted to be in plays could come there and be in plays. Some come to see the costumes. If they don't like the play, they like the costumes. Since I've been sick, we've had about 250 members, and this time they only had a little over 100. Since I've been sick. So you see, most of the people on the board are young, and they think that they should show off the one person especially that wants to go modern. She's more interested in her own career. How did you go about gathering your costumes? You have a lot of authentic costumes there. That's how we got them. It's because we're doing these plays. People give them to you? Yes, some people want to make that smaller. The thank yous. Those are all telling. Those are all things people have given us. When we decided to dig out the edition, the fellow that was running the machine said, I think my father did something on this house. I went in and got one of the programs, and we looked down and found his name, and he was just elated. He took the program down to where his father was, and his father was just thrilled to death. So he said, I'm going to cut my price in half. And he did. So you see, that's where, and we have a lot of famous people that have done, and I don't think we should ever. I notice that they're doing that at the other theaters, getting a list of people that have helped. Getting a list of people that have helped. They did do that for years. Anyone that helped at all. Do you just put on 19th century plays, or do you put on some 18th century plays? We just do anything before that. We can do anything before that. The fellow that taught me, I took classes in restoring plays because I didn't know about it. I learned a lot now. I watched The Collectors and things like that. I don't do any more things like that now, but I enjoy them. They're doing a lot more of that, of rebuilding houses and stuff now. Did you say you have an architect that oversaw the renovation that you did? Some of it, but some of the time they use my books. I use my books, but for instance, we had a big fireplace. It isn't exactly right, but we had more directors. That was the elder Mrs. Hiddens from the old Hotel Columbia. From the old Hotel Columbia. That's why I have so many of these old pictures, because I would look them up, and they called me, and, do you have a picture of such and such? Then I would go down and buy pictures. That one of the courthouse building, that was one of my pictures. I bought it in Portland. I just haunted those places. That's why I have so many books. I'm not going to give the books away. Lois Cleveland is going to take them. She's got an apartment. They got so they wouldn't come to look at books here. They got so they wouldn't take them back and do terrible things to them. You have to have somebody that's watching them. Couldn't you give them to the library? No, they wouldn't take them. And if they aren't taken out for ages, they won't keep them, and they aren't. the thing of it is that we don't want to lose them. You really do need a library system. That's what I have here. Could we use them in the museum research library? Yes, if you had room, but I'm not going to give the really valuable. I've got some that have been signed and are rare, and I'm not going to give those to. I was in hopes, for instance, that they would take some of these. Well, I've got one book. I'll show it to you. It's to, he had it rebound, but people it was written mainly about, I could use that. I can get some of the plays out of it because he hated the Indians. And of course, I love them. So that's why I'm not using it. But of course, I might do that because I've got those and I found some mistakes in some of them. The history of that is really, oh, I do that because my voice gets tired. Well, we are getting to the bottom. I used to have a great big stomach, and you see your voice comes from here. And now I'm getting it thinned down because I'm doing some exercises for it. Anyway, I have in mind the playbooks because I remember when you came to visit me, you would go to the city and get some of these playbooks. You really searched high and low for these books. Yes, all over the world. That's wonderful. The collection should be kept intact, really. Yes. On each play that we did, I have the program. I can get them. But you see, after I got sick, I had trouble getting the things. So I didn't come down and take pictures, and some of them didn't have any pictures of all. It wasn't anybody interested enough in it. And now one fellow wants to have a book of all the actors and what they've done in it. Well, maybe one person would come in one thing, in one play. I don't think we're interested in the actors. That's what Henry said. Henry Wineski said, we're not interested in the names of the people that did them. We didn't have any famous people. They just came there to have fun. They always wanted to do plays. So I'm against this business of, but now Mike Haywood, when he first came, he hadn't done any acting. What he did was, one day he said to me, I noticed he was doing some things that really have to be done. He said to me, there are lots of little rules. For instance, that you turn. You don't walk in front of anyone that's talking. They walk across and they spoil that person. So he was doing a lot of these little rules. I had taken all my textbooks and put them down there. And he finally grinned at me and said, you know, I read all those books up there in the green room. Now we've got separate keys for the green room and for the costume rooms. They'll come in and take. This one person, they said, was such a wonderful designer. Last time I saw her in a play, she had an umbrella that was beautiful. She carried it all through the play. No 19th century woman would have ever taken her umbrella in the living room, but they did. As kind of a prop, I think. Yes, well, she'd wave it in front of a lot of people. There were others who should have had the attention, too. If I was there, I'd make them change, you see. They don't like to do that. They think and directors don't tell them that. So that's why he doesn't answer He said, oh, she'll yell at me. But I didn't. He yelled at me, and that turned me off. Well, that's called stagecraft. They don't know stagecraft. They don't know 19th century either. We were talking about that in Seattle. I guess it was Dixie, knowing the tie into the college where they do the course on 19th century plays. Yes, I think that's a good idea. I saw a thing like that in New York, where the one play I wanted to see at all was in New York. They had two people, and in one was a real old-fashioned movie star. Oh, what was her name? There was only 3 people in this. I think that some of the old-time actors have mentioned that. They're beginning to deteriorate. They don't have any technique. And some of their techniques go clear back, and they're good. That's the reason, he says. Oh, that's just old-fashioned. Well, it isn't. Anyway, most of the play was by a man and a woman. Butterflies Are Free. Isn't that a play that has been revived? Yes, and anyway, they were pretty good actors, the man and the woman, but not really smooth. And of course, what's-her-name was in. She was an old-time movies actress. Was it Ellen Hayes or Jessica Tandy? No, Swanson. No, Julia Harris. No, she was in the movies, not on the stage. Gloria Swanson. No, Claudia Colbert. No, Jane Russell. No, anyway, when she came out on the stage, even the man and the woman were better. She did everything right. You always turn curtain ways, simple things like that. But I thought she wouldn't be doing them because she was a movie star. But boy, she did, and the other two were twice as good because she pointed up the right things. Somebody really knew what they were doing. When I was in college, I was taught those things. Boy, if we did them wrong, we were told. That's one of those things. I think there's much less tendency to discipline now than there used to be. Do you remember how long you served in the Historical Society Board? I don't know. I'm terrible about numbers. You see, my father was so good at numbers that you couldn't relax, huh? Yes. I think I was on, then off when you were still there. Yes, I became and I tell you, I sure miss, because I didn't know anything about Vancouver. You see, when I came and I had to learn, and I just loved, I can't think of her name. I can see her. But she treated that woman, that Klein. She's getting a divorce now. When you started at Clark College, was the campus where it is now? No, it was in. To get on stage at one place, we had to crawl through a window, so we put little steps on the outside. And then we had this Chuck. We couldn't think of his last name last night, but he was blind. He was just wonderful. He could even, if you gave him the dimensions, he could build. I think we still got some of those sets down there because I took some of the things that he made. If you gave him the right number, he could build it, and he was just wonderful. He was a wonderful actor, and in this play that we had, he was. That's the bench that I asked if you wanted. I got that, by the way, when I was over at Clark because I know it's mine, and I wondered if you wanted it. Because I walked the street to find this, and the arena is just wonderful to see, wonderful to use, because it's just very good-looking iron thing, and it's upholstered on top. It's one of those old fireplace benches type of thing, I think I'll have Aletha look at it and see if she wants to take it, because I told her I will take the things that are still mine. Chuck, he was blind, yet he could come down those long things, just as fast as anyone. Somebody voted him as secretary. He came and apologized and said how sorry he was. You didn't just think about him being, did you? Anyway, he got a good job back in the Middle West, last time I know. He had a job with the college and he had to ask somebody else to do his writing, but I think he finally had an operation to restore his sight. Yes, he was afraid to do that. He was afraid. Doing well. Yes, I know how that worked out. He was blind from birth. I remember we were friendly to him. It was interesting because he could tell you the shape of things, but people have to learn to see, and it doesn't come back to them. They would not be able to restore his sight totally because people have to learn to see, and visual signals had not been learned. He would come and practice his entrances and things. That theater was primarily, in fact, it was firstly entirely the arena. There wasn't much arena-type acting, so I had to work out my own system because I knew that up in Seattle, During the war, they had a small theater. We would have a rehearsal after we rebuilt the wall. I asked them if they would put a wall into the big dressing room backstage, and we built a path for him, you see, so that we could give plays both arena and the other. That's why we designed the new theater. This is the Decker Theater. We fixed it so we had places for the audience to sit around for the arena. I thought arena was awful for some people because they got so that they had to learn that they had to turn more often. A lot of these people that do arena figure out a change. That's why we did some of the plays in the theater. We could have them if they wanted to stand all one way. They couldn't. They had to turn, and you had to turn on a line. It was funny because after you'd seen an arena play and maybe there was a picture, they had to see that in their minds that it was there, and they would ask, "How did you hang that picture?" It's good for them to do that. It taught them a lot of special things that they wouldn't have gotten any other way. It was very impressive. That guy that took over after me, that was part of the trouble. In the first place, they objected that. I talked them out of many windows in that room, and they still don't have any, which is good because you don't need them. You don't have to worry about drapes or anything. The thing of it is, they're walking in front of people and they're doing things that's really irritating. Don't work out very good. There's a definite technique to keeping the face towards you never turn your back on the audience. You go on a slant. They don't know those old rules. They don't walk in front of people, especially if they're not important. Maybe they are. Maybe they've got something that you see. Where was Clark College when you first went to work there? Down on 4th Plain. That campus near Stapleton? Yes. Now they've got, it's beautiful now. There were trees there too. So unfortunately, the interview ran out at page 14 or 15. And I know there's more to it, and I can't find it right this moment, but I bet you anything it's down at the Historical Museum. So I can't wait to go check it out. Thank you for listening, and I hope I find the rest of that interview soon.